Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts who are...
My name is Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
I almost forgot to let you guys say your own names. We've got a couple guests here this week, some folks writing urban fantasy. We're going to be talking about kind of how to succeed in the genre and how they're collaborating together and also quitting the day job. And our guest is CN Crawford, but that's actually two people, Christine and Nick. And apparently they pass their laptops back and forth and edit each other's words. They've published several urban fantasy series, including the Vampires Mage series, Demon of Fire and Night, and the Dark Fae FBI series with another author, Alex Rivers. And I saw them on a Facebook group mentioning they were, at least one of them was about to quit the day job. And it's clear if you check them out on Amazon that their books are doing really well. So I decided to invite them on the show so we could pick their brains. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
We're good. Why don't you do a better intro than I did and tell us how you got writing and self-publishing and all that good stuff.
So I'm Christine.
I'm Nick. I'm Nick Crawford.
Yeah, so Crawford is Nick's last name. We're married, but I have my own last name too. But that became our pen name, Christine and Nick. And Nick kind of started us off with the writing thing. Like he had this random idea to write
on an airplane.
Yeah.
How's the volume, by the way? Was sounding okay?
You could talk a little louder, maybe, at least for me. Just lean right in there so we can see your nose hairs.
Awesome. So yeah, it was Nick's idea to start writing like a Harry Potter type thing that took place in Boston.
And I wrote like 2 or 3 chapters, and then you kind of grabbed it from me and took over. Yeah. And then we collaborated a lot on that series, and now we write independently. But Christine gets the final word, so the voice is in her voice, so it's consistent.
And while we were working on that first book, Nick was reading like blogs about self-publishing. So we were probably like slightly unusual in that we always intended just to self-publish. Like we never wanted an agent, or we never wanted to traditionally publish. Nick was like, I guess it started with like Hugh Howey's blog, and Nick was like, "This is what we're doing." So that was our goal from the beginning.
Yeah, for me it was J.A. Conrath's blog. When I saw that and he was posting how much he was earning, I was like, let me just skip this agent trad publishing thing and jump straight into getting some stuff up there.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like you kind of started out, slowish. Maybe I think you had like one novel in 2015 or 14 and one in 2015, and then you just really got going here in the last year or two. What's the path been like, and what motivated you to really start publishing more quickly?
Part of it was just, so 2014 is when we had our son, and that was like a big time suck. So as he got older, it became a little bit easier to write more. But then also, I mean, because The Witching Elm was our first book, and we didn't, we were like learning how to write at that point. So once we got through the first, I'd say the whole first series, we were kind of like learning how to write, basically. Then it just became easier to write faster after that.
And learning about plotting.
Yeah. Outlining. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of all that, you were saying how you collaborate on your stuff, and in the intro it was you hand the laptop back and forth to edit each other's words. Do you literally edit each other's stuff?
So Christine edits right at the moment. Christine edits my stuff, and I still have a day job, and so I haven't been looking at her stuff as much as I'd like to. So we're trying to work on that, so a bit more opportunity to have input.
So yeah, our series are like varying degrees of being co-authored. So the Vampires Mage series is pretty much just me. The Demons of Fire and Night is like Nick's ideas and my editing. And then the Dark Fae FBI is me co-writing pretty much more evenly with another author.
Do you everything is, I assume, eventually professionally edited?
Yes. Yeah. So mine is like a second draft of what Nick does, and then We had been, you know, experimenting with having one editor, but now we usually get two sets of editors as well.
Yeah, it's good to know because I mean, especially, and well, I'll talk about this more after, but it seems to me like with collaboration, even though it seems like you'd catch more of each other's errors, I would wondered if maybe you end up becoming so familiar with the other person's voice and style that you sort of have the same sort of mental autocorrect that you would have with your own writing, and end up sort of letting a lot more stuff through.
Yeah, I think so. When I'm going over Nick's stuff, it's actually not really editing at all. it's like a second draft revision where like the dialogue changes, or I'm not looking for grammar errors so much. So that it would definitely need like a proper edit.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a better way to go about it. So I'm always interested to see how different people handle collaboration.
So I'll write in brackets, you know, funny joke here, Christine, and she'll put in something funny.
Okay, so I have to ask, now that I wasn't too sure that the two of you are married, but now that I know that you are, I inevitably have to ask the question. Have you ever had a difference of opinion? And if so, how do you handle it without actually seriously getting the divorce lawyers on the phone and saying it's going to be this way or no way?
Yeah, that's why we write our own first drafts now.
Yeah, so we sort of like cede control to the other person. So like we had a difference of opinion about Nick's plotting today. He asked me for help with something, and I was like, I think you should do it this way. And he was like, I don't want to do it that way. And I was like, fine, do it your way. And that's the end of it. You know, like, well, like it's ultimately that's Nick's series, so he's gonna call the shots on it.
I do want her input. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the best scenario I ever had was I literally almost got into a shouting match with my wife in a restaurant where she's like, you can't see that castle from that point of view. And I am pulling over salt shakers, tea dispensers, everything on the table going, no, if this is here, this is here, this is here, this is here, you can see it from here. She's like, and she's moving stuff around. No, you made it sound like it's over here. I'm like, So I'm just curious how another, husband and wife actually handle the situation. So I'm glad I'm not the only one then.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we have like fundamentally different ways of approaching our books too. So that kind of means we sort of have to let one person take control of the shape of the book.
All right. Well, I know we've got a lot of urban fantasy writers that are listeners to the show. And, I'd say it and probably paranormal romance are the most two popular subgenres of fantasy. And it takes quite a bit to hit that top 100 for the category. How are you guys finding, is it pretty tough was it tough to break in right now? Or is it still possible to kind of jump in there and be found?
I would say each series has improved over the previous.
Mm-hmm.
So like the Demons of Fahrenheit year one. Magic Hunter did well last summer or last spring. Then my series did even better. And then Christine's series with Alex or Michael did even better than that. So it's sort of like every time we release a new series, it improves it. So if you're writing urban fantasy, that's when you're going to see the jumps. Is not between book 1 and book 5. It's between book 1 of series A and book 1 of series B. So that's our experience.
Yeah. So in specific terms, I'd say like the Magic Hunter that we published in April of last year, that probably got to, when we first published it, probably got to 900 or something in the store. Then Nick's book that he published a couple months later got to 250 in the store. And then this year when we published Dark Fae, that got to 70 in the store. So each time and I don't expect it to better that next time, but so far, like it's been, each time we release, there's more and more readers that we have from the last time. And then it's easier to get new readers. So our mailing list just keeps growing. So each time we release, it's easier to get a good rank.
Very cool. And it sounds like your readers are willing to jump over to the next series when you start a new one. You finding that's true?
Yeah. And we tie them together intentionally. So,
yeah. Apart from the Dark Fae series, which is in its own world, all the other books are in the same world. So that makes it a little bit easier. And sometimes I'll have characters show up again too.
Did you have any challenges? Has it just been kind of gradual that you're building your mailing list? And I guess we'll ask you a little more about the marketing stuff in the second half of the show, but did you have any challenges kind of getting noticed with that first series? It sounds like you actually debuted pretty high from the beginning.
Well, yeah, except for our very first series, didn't do too much.
Yeah,
Like,
the Witching Elm series sold like literally nothing.
We released it on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Like, it did nothing. So that's not a good day to release a book because lots of people are buying books from trad publishers that day, not from movies.
So from our first, our first series, we probably had like 100 readers following us from those 3 books. And then when we released to Magic Hunter, that was kind of a big jump to that point. And probably some of it was we had the right cover at the time. It was a Rebecca Frank cover, and her covers were super popular. And we were sort of like, I've been at that point, like, but when we published our first series, we hadn't been reading in the genre. So we were like, let's just do this random thing. Like, I'm obsessed with colonial history. I was like, let's make a whole book about colonial history. And like, no one was interested in that. So by the time we published our next series, I read a bunch of books and you'd read a bunch of books. So we knew what people actually wanted to read.
You know, it's interesting. A question I was going to have, and I'll just ask it now. A lot of people get into the writing business because they had a story already in their head. It's been kicking around, developing for however many years, and then they decided they had to write it. It sounds like you decided you had to write, but didn't necessarily have the story developed and just sort of went with your current interest.
Yeah. I mean, the decision, I don't know, how long was it that you decided you wanted to be a writer?
No, it's super impulsive.
It was, yeah, it was like a random...
We were on an airplane. I said, someone should write a reverse Harry Potter. It's like super original. And Christine said, Nick, no. And then I did a couple chapters, and then you got sucked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a sense of like, we have to tell this story. But now that we're doing it, I'm like, this is what was missing in our lives. Like I needed some kind of creative outlet, and this is just perfect. So it wasn't like, I didn't know ahead of time that that's what we should be doing, but it was the right thing.
Cool.
And I just wrote about my weird obsessive interest that no one cares about.
But you know what? If you write anything well enough, people start caring about it.
Yeah.
But, so you're writing urban fantasy. Are there any other genres you're thinking you might go into at any point?
So I my day job, I'm a scientist, so I'm definitely planning on writing a techno thriller.
Cool.
So like AJ Riddle kind of thing. Genetics, aliens, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, it's again, like you'll find, particularly, especially now you've got some books under your belt. I almost wish that I had started writing the thing I want to write as my second book, as opposed to my first, because it would have been a story better told. As opposed, you know, like you want to have some of your chops developed before you dig into the thing that you're really interested in, perhaps.
I was along the same lines that
yeah,
safer to work in urban fantasy to start, and then I don't know, others are doing the same thing, holding off on their big idea.
Yeah. But one other thing before I hand you over again, but do you feel like you have like different strengths as authors between the two of you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
Sure. Yeah. Christine can answer.
We can say each other's strengths, so it'll be like good. So I'd say Nick's strengths are like scene setting. Like he will come up with these like really lush, dramatic scenes. Like in his book Nocturnal Magic, there's this like whole forest with glowing mushrooms and like enormous spiders, right?
The caterpillars.
So it's like really like amazing scene setting, and then the action scenes are really good, and the magic is pretty, like he comes up with these, because he's probably read a lot more fantasy than I have, so the magic he comes up with is pretty original and exciting.
And Christine is excellent at the dialogue, so whenever there's something that's witty or funny that needs to be said, I sort of like put the brackets in and say, Christine, go write this. And you know, anything, well, my book hasn't, it's been like the slow burn in my books. There hasn't been the big romantic scene, but when it comes, I think I'll be leaning on Christine heavily for that particular moment.
Yeah, with my other co-author and I, like he'll write it's like totally traditional gender roles. Like he'll write the car chase scenes, and then he'll hand me like a blank page that's like romance here.
Do you guys feel that you have similar writing styles? I mean, have you had to adapt to each of your styles so that you could find a comfortable middle ground to work in? I love the look between each other, like
Like,
hmm.
I think, like, in terms of style, probably because I do the final drafts, like it probably sounds more like me than like Nick.
Yeah. And I know I'll write a chapter every now and then. I'm like, oh, I got Christine's voice well done in this chapter. So, but it's hard for me to put like my finger on what that is. But I know it when I write it.
How do the two of you decide on the plot of a book? I mean, I heard you mention that you like to take some of his ideas and maybe flesh it out. I mean, does one approach the other and say, I have an idea, and together you flesh out the story?
I think right now it's, at least in my book, I'll plot it out and then I'll get stuck and I'll say, Christine, help me. And then she'll jump in and just say, why are you doing X, Y, and Z? And then we'll have the argument and then I'll think about it and then I'll keep going.
Yeah.
And then with yours, I haven't been very helpful in the most recent series because I've been busy day job. But
yeah, so we pretty much like outline independently. So I think it's more like we'll go to the other person when we're stuck on something, but we mostly it goes better if we just come up with our own ideas.
So if you said you outline separately, does that mean like you each come up with what you think should be in the book, then you sit down at lunch and say, you gotta go, each person gets a highlighter. No, 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 no. That sounds good. No.
It's more like we each have our own series that we take charge of. So like, even though the series kind of like sound the same and they have the same world building and similar characters, like Nick, like the Demons of Fire and Night series is kind of Nick's baby, and I'll come in and add to it, but he's in charge of what the outline is and what's going to happen. And like Vampire's Mage is mine. The Dark Fae series that I work on, that's probably more that's more like both of us are coming up with the outline. But probably because we're not married, it's easier because we're like more polite.
I'm just gonna go no comprendo.
All right, I have a few kind of listener viewer questions for you guys before we jump into the marketing stuff, although some of this kind of leads into the marketing. On urban fantasy, Holly wants to know, what do you see as upcoming future trends?
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I know that I'm going to have good insight into future trends. I mean, I guess I can say, like, I personally don't think any, like, say, supernatural types are necessarily important to what people are looking for. I think different audience groups are looking for, like, a light and funny urban fantasy read with a lot of romance, or they're looking for, like, a dark and mysterious urban fantasy read. And as long as you do one of those things well and know what your audience wants, then
you should talk about your thing with Alex and how you come up with the idea for writing that.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, it seems like I've seen a lot of these FBI things right now. Is that sort of maybe what are the current trends? Is that kind of a thing that you're seeing a lot of too, or is it just a couple of books out there I happen to have stumbled across?
Yeah.
So there was another book up with a similar idea with an FBI agent.
T.S. Paul's
book that was doing really well. And we saw it. We're like, well, that's, it's a great idea. We should write a book in that sort of idea. No, but that's trying to you to explain it.
No, so Alex Rivers, who's my co-author, he writes under the name Mike Omer, and he writes crime and FBI books, like under that pen name. And then I write urban fantasy books. So we basically started from the point of let's like combine the two things that we write. And then my day job was that I'm a psychologist. So we made a character who was a forensic psychologist to kind of like, so I'm like, I already know about that, so we can add that in. And then I think when we were in the process of working with that, T.S. Paul's book came out and did super well. And that was like a good sign to me that maybe people wanted to read it too. But yeah, so it's kind of has both those elements of like FBI crime and the magic stuff. Yeah,
I guess maybe folks can just kind of watch the top 100 and see what's starting to change and come on, and probably some of the vampires and kick butt women and stuff will always be popular in the genre, I imagine.
Yeah, I guess, but my feeling is that it's sort of like what they should look for isn't necessarily what the supernatural characters are or what the setting is or anything like that, but what's like what's the tone and the level of humor and the level of romance. I think those are probably more important. And it can kind of go in either direction as long as you do it right. Like Shannon Mayer came out with a book that's super dark, like a super dark thriller that just went into the top 100. And people could kind of like go in that direction. And then Helen Harper came out with something that's also doing amazingly well. And it's like really light and funny and kind of like more like a cozy. But I think those are kind of the elements that attract people rather than the like trying to get this supernatural creature or whatever.
Okay, Holly also wanted to know, maybe kind of playing into this, are there any story types right now where you're just seeing too many of them? Are there too many like bounty hunters or investigators or treasure hunters, or is it played out?
There's no way I could answer that without insulting like a ton of people, but I don't know. I actually can't think of any anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know of any?
No,
I mean, there is really no way to answer that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like with the vampires, they're always saying, "Oh, vampires are so out," you know, and then they continue to pop up. So
we've had sexy vampires since like 1812 or something. I don't know why I can date that specifically, but I'm just thinking since Lord Byron, we've had sexy vampires. So I don't see any of that going away anytime soon, as long as people can take a particular thing and make it exciting.
All right. And she was also wondering, do you think it matters whether you have a male or female protagonist for urban fantasy?
Yes.
Yes.
Like
so there's two, like there's the male urban fantasies, like the Jim Butcher style, which is popular right now. We have friends writing that, they're doing really well. And then there's the female protagonist urban fantasies, and they're totally different than reader expectations. So if you're gonna write one or the other, you should go read a few first before you start, I would say.
Yeah, I do. I kind of think we have male readers, but when I conceive of how we're marketing stuff or what our readers' interests are, I'm usually thinking of women. Like, and it's probably, I feel like you kind of have to pick a gender. It's probably like offensive, but yeah, I definitely think of myself as writing for women.
And Antonio was wondering who did the covers for the Memento Mori Witch trilogy. He really liked them.
That's Carlos
Quevedo.
Yeah.
Who's a really fantastic designer.
All right, cool.
You can find this info on our website.
Well, let me kind of guide us. We've started talking about marketing a little bit, but take us into, I was talking about it's pretty competitive, the subgenre, compared to some of the other fantasies. Yeah, it seems like you really have the potential to do well too. And I see you guys have got some of your books in like fantasy, new adult in college, mystery thriller, psychics, horror, dark fantasy, and mythology, and that they're not just all in the urban fantasy category. Was that trying to find less competitive genres, and do you recommend other people do the same?
Yeah, I think like the one that I'm consistently not sure about is whether or not we belong in dark fantasy. But so that one's kind of borderline, but they are on the darker end of urban fantasy. We usually have like almost, or not so much Nick's books, but like my books usually have like torture sequences. but I'd say, yeah, looking for like some of the less competitive categories is helpful.
My most recent one ended up in Arthurian Legends, legitimately, because there's an Arthurian theme. And
yeah.
I'm kind of excited about that. Not a very competitive category.
Yeah.
And you guys are in Kindle Unlimited right now. Has that been your strategy from the beginning, or have you tried going wide at all?
We're just about to try going wide for the Memento Mori series, which isn't a big risk because it's our lowest selling series anyway. But it might help us get a book bub or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'll see. Yeah.
We've been in KU otherwise. entirely.
Yeah, a KU is like a major part of our income.
Yeah, it seems like you're doing really well right now with all your books ranking up there. Are a lot of people buying them, or do you find that it's kind of an equal number of people borrowing through KU?
Yeah, it's like, at least in terms of the money we make, it's about 50-50 with sales versus KU. But then we had like some luck with it. We got a Prime deal spring that really helped bring up your
The Magic Hunter series.
I keep forgetting the name of the series.
Just wait till you have more books. People will ask you about something that happened and you have no recollection of what even happened in that book or the name of it. All right, Jin was wondering, what are 3 must-hit tropes in urban fantasy? Precisely 3. Do not give me 2. Do not give me 4. I want 3.
I'm about to fail a quiz.
For writing for women, then I would say it's a strong female protagonist, and she can't defer to the guy. I think that's a critical thing people mess up a lot. And then you gotta have a sexy male protagonist who's a little bit scary. That's 2. Right, Christine, you gotta fill it in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you kind of covered it with your first one, but if you're writing a female protagonist, she has to save the day in the end. Like, I think that's one of the, maybe a slight differentiator from
PNR or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know as much about romance, but
and I think our own readers expect a happily ever after. They're definitely get upset if it's not clear that everything worked out in the end.
But main characters can die, but not
happily.
Yeah. Some of the ones. Yeah.
All right, and CM Johnson asks if you guys are writing to market or just kind of telling the stories you want to tell.
I think we're I feel a little bit lucky in that they intersect. So like the stories I want to tell happen to be pretty mainstream urban fantasy stories that have a strong romance element. Like that's what I like reading. And that's also what a lot of other people like reading. But we definitely will look at like what covers are popular and what, like, oh, people like bright colors or that kind of thing to make sure that we're signifying what's in the book.
When you're like talking about how you will show up in different less competitive subgenres sometimes, do you ever, when you're crafting a story, like sort of make a conscious decision to include certain elements that you think will help you fit into other categories that would allow you to rank higher?
Not the only way the only sense in that would be the case would be with romance, and this is like sort of a recent thing that I'm thinking more about, is maybe writing a little more romance into the stories, because so we have a Facebook group, and I'll often pull them like, what else do you read, or what other books do you like, and they're super like enthusiastic and give us tons of information, and they're really into romance. So like and that's something that I like reading and I like writing. So I'll think about maybe adding in like more romance elements in the future. So so I can sell to romance.
Legitimately put yourself in romance.
Yeah, it seems like that's like, I feel like there's probably the best balance is a lot of people will do the right to market thing, and they will, school themselves on the thing that will sell well and then try to write it as well as they can. And I think the much better way is to find out what elements of your chosen market you write best, and just sort of mix those in. So I'm like, again, I do even less of that. I typically write exactly what I had in mind, and often the market is a mystery to me, which is why we run this show, so I can learn more. But it's good to know that like you can still learn from your audience, but not necessarily have to pick and choose from whatever the mainstream says is supposed to be in your story.
Yeah. And I'd say probably thinking about Amazon categories would be pretty low down on our strategy anyway. If anything, we would think about also bots and like what stories is this similar to, but I don't know that Amazon categories are that helpful.
Speaking of multiple genres, do you try to write in such a way that would appeal to the other genres, that you actually written books in? Or, I mean, are you hoping you'll get fans that'll you are reading one genre is like, hey, look, they wrote another one. Let's go give that one a try. Or are you just hoping to appeal to a broader audience?
Like if I go write techno thrillers or something like that, or
yeah, like for instance, if you write like a techno thriller, he's like, okay, you've got stuff in the urban fantasy, where you try and write it, say, okay, well, let's see if I can appeal to others, or just the heck with everything you've written thus far, let's just focus on one new piece of the pie, sort of thing.
I know definitely the techno thriller. The plan for that is that'll be a separate pen name, will be my real name, so I can drop the PhD letters at the end of it, and with the we're not going to tell our regular readers about it, mostly because I'm worried about publishing and then having weird also bots, because they're all UF readers, like diehard UF readers, and then you publish techno thriller, but it's, Helen Harper as an also bot, it's going to not go so well. So.
But yeah, so it depends how similar the genres are. So one of my next projects is going to be like a fantasy romance, and there is a lot of crossover between my readers and like Jamin Eve's readers. Like there's already crossover there, and so I think that that would be under my same name, and I would expect the same sort of readers to be interested in it too.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, I'll say as somebody with a pen name that I usually do tell my regular readers, but I'll wait a couple weeks until the book has been out and kind of establish some also bots. And sometimes once things start falling off, you can get an extra little bump too, and that helps goose the algorithms a little bit. Just throwing that out there. But I had forgot one of Holly's questions earlier. Do you have any thoughts on promos that work particularly well for urban fantasy?
So usually when we first, we pretty much don't use promos apart from when we first put a first book in a series out. That's the only time I use something like ENT. And apart from that, it's like too much work to, I don't know.
But back in the beginning, we used them a lot.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten a bigger reader base, it's not needed as much. So now it's more of like a combination of Facebook, Amazon, and then in the beginning we might use.
Yeah, I do. If we're just publishing, like if we have a new series out, then I'll usually contact ENT and Book Barbarian, I think. I think there's and Robin Reed's doesn't let you book if the book's not out yet. So it's really just those two that we use, and then apart from that, it's all Facebook and Amazon.
Are you buying the pay-per-click ads on Amazon and Facebook then?
Yeah.
We have never gotten a book club.
Yeah. I don't even know how many times we've applied, like 100-something times.
I feel like that's one of the dog is shaken off. That's one of the things about the more popular genres is even though there's a potential to do really well, there's probably a zillion people every week asking for an urban fantasy. And BookBub doesn't even break it down. It's just fantasy, right? So that you've got the epic fantasy and they're competing with it too.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing a newsletter? And you did mention it earlier. What are you doing to entice people to sign up?
We pretty much followed, so we have Chris Fox's Right to Market book. And one of the main things that I took away from that was writing a reader magnet that you can get from the book. So in all of our first books in our series, there's like a short story reader magnet that you can only get by signing up to the mailing list. So we do that for all of our series, and it works really well. I mean, people unsubscribe too, but it's I think a pretty good.
We try to leave like something a little unfinished in book one that is resolved in the reader magnet, so people are incentivized to go read the reader magnet.
Or because a lot of them are also romance readers, they're like, I want the hot guy's perspective.
Yes,
like they'll totally be motivated by that.
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to do it, and it sounds like you're trying to get the people like after they've read the first book.
Yeah.
And I love that because you're not just taking anybody that wants free stuff. They've already read the book and they've decided they're fans.
Yeah, we've done a couple giveaway things too, like a Ryan Z giveaway, which was pretty good. But they definitely don't buy books as much as people who've read one of your books and liked it. But I think they can be useful for other stuff, like maybe an ARC list or something like that.
All right. Are you, let me ask, are you doing any newsletter swaps with other authors or any kind of networking group promo stuff?
Yeah, so we do some group promo stuff, but we've been pretty cautious about the newsletter swaps because I think we tend to burn out our list. So we did a few early on, and then people, the clicks, the open rate went down pretty quickly. So
yeah.
Yeah.
We've never done a straight up newsletter swap, I don't think, but I don't think we have. But I did notice that the more we emailed our list, if it wasn't a release, then the lower the open rates were when we did have a release. So right now we're pretty much just email our list for actual releases unless there's like something really big happening. Like we just put together a urban fantasy book club, and so we emailed our list about the book club. But I would be really cautious about like emailing too frequently. I don't know. It probably works for some people, but it didn't work for us as well.
I'm always very careful about what I send out, and I'll do less on my name, but on the pen name, she's trying to still establish herself. I like to talk about myself in the third person. So I've been a little more open to it, but I'll definitely time it. So like I have a new release, and oh, these other two authors also have new releases if you want to check those out too. And I feel like people aren't going to really object to that too much.
Yeah.
Since you guys, I've heard you mention that you have multiple, or you have lists, plural. Do you have separate newsletter lists for all the different series genres you have, or you just have one master list that you're able to, like, say, segregate off a couple chunks of them and then just target certain ones of them, or how do you handle that many? How many points of interest that you guys have with all your readers?
We pretty much have 3 lists. So one is just our list that's from all of our books. One of them is a shared list with Alex Rivers, who's my co-author. So that one, before I emailed the list, I'd always check with him, like, are we emailing about this or not? But it's pretty much just for our releases. And then the third one is a small list that we've got from like the giveaways that we've done.
It's so, Alex Z stuff. Or
Ryan Z, yeah. So that's we keep that as a separate list.
All right. I was just kind of curious about that because we've had some that say like, oh, I'll just group them all together and I'll just, write a generic enough message as, okay, for my case, for you mystery lovers, I've got this going on. For you fantasy lovers, I've got this going on. But others don't like doing that. They like separating out. So always good to hear like what other people like to do too. So
we used to have much more, I'd say much more elaborate stuff in our newsletter. Like I tried to make it like a blog, but then I thought maybe that wasn't working for us, and I subscribed to Bella Forrest's newsletter, and I was getting hers, and it was like it's just like a picture at the top and then like the links, and I was like, I really like that. So we started imitating that. It's like really simple. It's just like one banner at the top and then like a ton of links, but I think it works well. Good. And then the stuff that we do that's more interactive and interesting and like here's what's going on in our life, that happens on our Facebook group.
I think especially if you're going to have a VA send out the newsletter, I imagine she does, that at that point it gets a little more hard to, to say, hey, well, this is what's going on with my life.
Yeah.
I still do this is what's going on a little bit because I always get a lot of email back from people that then tell me what's going on in their life. And it's tough because it's a lot of extra hours you have to spend answering email, but I don't know. I've seen it both ways, though, and I think it can definitely work both ways.
Yeah.
I noticed when I popped over to your website that you were using BookFunnel to give away some short stories, it looks like. And it kind of looked like they could just get them. They had to sign up with BookFunnel to get it delivered. I was just wondering if you're just giving them away for free for fun, or if you're getting the email address from BookFunnel and then creating a list out of that.
Yeah, it's all so convoluted now. I don't know where those go. But we do get email addresses from that. I'm not sure. They probably go to our regular list.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking those are people who must be interested in us for some other reason, like they've read one of our books. I don't know why anyone else would end up on our site.
No,
well, it doesn't seem like a bad idea since with KU you can't do a perma-free. But, here you've got some short stories that people can always get for free.
Yeah.
Earlier on, when you were saying when you first started writing that you, after an initial misstep, you read some of the stuff in the genre to get an idea of what a book like this should look like. Do you still do a lot of reading in urban fantasy?
Yeah, and since I went full time a couple weeks ago, I made it my mission to like I need to keep up with what people are writing, what people are interested in. I really love young adult books, so anything that's young adult and urban fantasy, I'm really drawn to. But I've been reading more adult urban fantasy too.
Do you find that it's more like, I mean, aside from the enjoyment of it, do you feel it's more about like learning what is the prevailing trend, or is it almost for inspiration at this point?
I'd say inspiration.
Yeah. I feel like I'm pretty bad at identifying trends. Like I was sort of saying earlier, like the two books that I've been reading recently that are urban fantasy books that are both immensely popular. I can find no common ground between them. So yeah, it's I'd say like inspiration or some of it's like figuring out what readers like if this book is immensely popular, like what is the emotional experience that they're getting from it, and is that something that I want to write?
What are those two books?
So Helen Harper's recent book, Slouch Witch, which is like very like light and funny and comedic and kind of almost like a cozy a little bit, at least in the beginning. I'm in the beginning of it. And then the other one was Shannon Mayer's Fury of the Phoenix, and both are like wildly successful. But Shannon Mayer's is super dark, like very like a thriller kind of with it's much more serious. And the two books like have nothing in common. Both have a lot of appeal to readers. So I guess when I'm reading stuff like that, I'm thinking more like what emotional experience is it giving to the readers, and like is that something like Shannon Mayer's book is something I would think I may not want to go in that direction because it's so dark and I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. But so I guess it's like thinking more about like less about trends and more about like how it makes readers feel and how I would feel writing it. So I'm a psychologist.
So you're not psychoanalyzing the characters as in other people's books to see if they hit all the right hot guy tropes.
Yeah.
We should say, like with someone like Shannon Mayer, she's been publishing for a while and has like a huge fandom built up too.
Yeah.
And I know Chris Fox talks about this in his book. You kind of have to be careful when you're trying to pick out the trends, because if they're just super popular, they could write whatever they want, kind of to some extent. So just something to watch out for people who might be thinking of kind of doing the right to market, and maybe find the people maybe like you guys that have only been publishing seriously for a couple years and see what you're doing and how it's working. And just a thought. But one last question from me on this. As I mentioned before, your covers are really cool, and we had a couple of people in chat say they really liked them. It really, I'm sure it's helped that you've just really nailed that urban fantasy feel with them. Are you doing just kind of stock photos with some illustrated backgrounds or Photoshop manipulation, or where are you getting these covers? What are you doing?
So a lot of our series are done by Rebecca Frank, who has done like a lot of the popular urban fantasy books, The Demons of Fire and Night. I had some of my covers redone actually, so the paperbacks are her, and then the ebooks are another designer. And then somebody named Clarissa Yo has done our most recent series. So they're a combination of, I'd say that the Rebecca Frank covers are the most heavily photo manipulated with the most highlights on the hair and stuff like that. And Clarissa is a little more, it's more like Photoshop. It looks a little more realistic.
It seems like in the genre that you don't have to do the illustrated photos or illustrated covers that you often see in like epic fantasy. But I've seen a lot where it's like a real person photo, and then the background kind of looks magical. And I don't know if they're just same manipulation, or I know I've used Gene Malika before, and he does a model, but then he illustrates the background, and those are really cool.
Oh, those colors are awesome.
Do you think that's cool for the genre, that's, you don't necessarily have to spend $1,000 on a custom illustration?
Yeah, I mean, well, Gene Molokai, I don't know, but I imagine.
Well, he's a lot, but I mean, in general, if you're getting stock photo people and manipulating the background.
You can probably find someone who's not necessarily that expensive, but you might have to take a lot of control over it, over the like creative decisions. You know what I mean? Because they might not have. Part of what probably makes people expensive is that they've studied the genres and they can say this is what an urban fantasy cover needs to look like. And if you're going to someone who's less tested, it might be that you have to be like really precise with what you want it to look like or something like that. I do think in urban fantasy, compared to a lot of other genres, I think covers are super important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I also know from experience that one of the better things about having not necessarily a higher price, but a more experienced artist is that you can sort of trust their advice. So it's definitely one of the reasons to get somebody who's been in the game for a while. When you're plotting out the next book you're going to write, how much of that decision is based upon which of your series is doing best at the moment? Do you sort of stoke the hottest fire, or do you just write whatever is next?
Like with our first series, it was intended to be 4 books or 5 books, and it wasn't doing very well. We just had to wrap it up at 3. So it was definitely like financially driven and a movement to new adult. But now we just sort of alternate as books are finished, I would say.
But yeah, so I guess the Dark Phase series did so well, and that's got kind of a spy thing going on. So we did think, oh, let's like make, and I'm really into spy stories, and we thought let's make our next one like a spy-related urban fantasy. So
okay.
it's kind of like if we think, oh, people like this, then we'll keep going with it.
All right. And like, do you ever put any thought into like whether or not you're going to try to build some series momentum, or again, is it just the next book is the next book regardless of that? Rapid releases in the same series to try to keep the whole series ranking high.
Oh yeah, so that is probably for our next release. We did this a little bit with the Dark Phase series, and probably for my next urban fantasy series, we'll hold off on publishing the first book until at least the second book is written, so they could be released faster.
Yep.
All right, cool. Jeff, on to you.
Alrighty. You mentioned before you use Facebook, obviously. I mean, are there any platforms you favor? I mean, are there any you avoid?
We don't use Twitter very much.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. I don't use Twitter either.
We did a little bit in the beginning, and it's pretty much.
I just end up like retweeting political posts that have nothing to do with our writing.
Or Instagram, which we probably should use more.
Yeah.
I have yet to figure out how to make Instagram work for me aside from just posting a cover image and like, hey, here's my cover. Have a great one. I was like, I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do there, but my wife uses it religiously. I'm like, yeah, tell me what you're doing there, dear. What's the point of this whole thing? But I'm still learning on that. Have you tried using any Facebook ads?
Yeah, yes. We definitely use Facebook ads. So
good success with them?
Yep.
They used to be a lot more successful. So when we first started using Facebook ads, we'd have like 11 cents per click or something. And now that's no longer the case. So I don't know if that's more people using it or what, but I find them, I was just spent all day trying to get some Facebook ads working reasonably. And I find the whole experience frustrating, but I do think it's useful.
Yeah, I found that. Yeah, I think it has great potential if you get, for lack of a better technical term, if you get the right recipe down, where you tell it what your target audience is, what you're willing to do, that sort of thing. But I've yet to figure that recipe out yet. But I'm still tinkering every once in a while. But all right, that's it for me. Let me hand you back to Lindsay here so we can wrap this up for you guys.
All right. Yes. Thank you for coming on today. And why don't you tell us where people can find you out online and maybe which books they should check out?
You can find us on cncrawford.com. And I think I'd say start with the Dark Fae FBI series. It's the one everybody.
That's the one you're not working on and that she's working on with someone else?
That's the best one. No.
It's the most popular at the moment, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, so depending what you like, because the next Demons of Fire and Night is kind of the more YA series. But yeah, and you can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. If you look up CN Crawford in Facebook, I think it comes up.
All right, and it sounds like if they go to your site, they can grab some free short stories, and their email address will go somewhere, perhaps the book funnel.
I have one final Facebook question if you guys have time real quick. One of our online viewers just chat or typed in there from Dale. Let's see, any tips for increasing reader interaction with your author Facebook page?
Well, I kind of gave up on the author Facebook page, and because Facebook doesn't show it to a lot of people. So that's why we created our Facebook group, which is awesome. And I think, like, in terms of interacting with the Facebook group, it's if you kind of like just are yourself, and like today I asked my group how to make a hamburger because I'm vegetarian and I had to make my son a hamburger. And it was like totally not related to our books, but it was something that people were interacting with on a personal level. So I think if you create a group and then you interact with people as like just the way you are in real life.
Yeah, I've got a small little Facebook group that pretty much has all handles on my beta readers and all that jazz. Every very once in a while, I'll post a message like, "Save yourself the 2 hours. Don't watch this movie because this movie sucks." And I usually get the sympathetic votes there, but
yeah.
So I know what you mean. Nothing relating to writing. It's just being yourself, essentially.
Right.
Rick Gualtieri.
Yeah, Rick Gualtieri has the best Facebook group apart from ours. But
this is really good.
But it's like super active, like just people posting weird sense of humor all day. But so it's worth looking at.
The Tome of Bill.
Yeah.
Good deal.
All right, I've got dogs roaming around, clacking their toenails on the floor, so I guess it's time to wrap up the show. Got your links, and I'll put them in the show notes for episode 141. Come on by marketingsff.com if you guys want, and I'll put links to the books and your website on there and see if I can find your Facebook group. I feel for you because I can't eat dairy, and I had to buy so many cheese. And there's like so many kinds of cheese. I was like, I'm confused. I don't know what is for what, but it's a rough life. Thankfully, the internet is there to help.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Thanks for all the info.
All right, thank you. It was fun.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.